A very good morning to you and welcome. I'm Krishnan Giri-Murthy. I'm going to chair this panel on diversity. Thank you very much indeed for coming along. Now, this, of course, forms part of the Festival of Advertising, celebrating 100 years of the IPA, and just over the road is an exhibition about how advertising has influenced British society. So do go over there and have a look at how things have changed and what kind of society, or how society looked different to how it might look today if you step out into Brick Lane. And that's very much what we're going to be talking about today in terms of whether there is a lack of inclusion, both in terms of what you see in advertising and within the industry itself, what the benefits of a more diverse industry might be, and whether that makes commercial sense and what the future may look like. So let me introduce you to our panel. Starting right next to me is Michelle Oliver, Vice President of Marketing for Mars UK. Now, Michelle led the team which won last year's Channel 4 competition to win £1 million of airtime for an ad representing disability, with what I'm sure many of you will remember was a great campaign around Maltesers. Hamza Arshad, next to Michelle, is an actor, comedian, writer, tens of millions of YouTube views, and one of Britain's online stars. In 2011, he was the 7th most viewed channel on YouTube, with Diary of Badman. As one of the YouTube creators for change, he's part of YouTube's initiative to combat hate speech, counter xenophobia and extremism, and make the case for greater tolerance and empathy towards others. And he works with other big institutions, including the police and schools, on those topics as well. So we'll be talking to him a little bit about that. Nishma Robb is Google's head of ads marketing for the UK and Ireland, and also chair of Women at Google UK. She's been recognised as one of the ad industry's trailblazers by Campaign magazine in 2016, and says she's on a mission to help inspire girls with the magic of digital. And Dan Brooke, on the end, is Channel 4's Chief Marketing and Communications Officer, and the Channel 4 Board Diversity Champion. He was also named just a couple of weeks ago, wasn't it, by the government as the Disability Champion to help improve representation of disabled people in the media. Dan leads the marketing operation at Channel 4, and he was in charge of projects including last year's Paralympics campaign and the one before that. So all the big sort of award-winning Channel 4 stuff, Dan is the man who runs it. So let me ask you to welcome our panel. Let's start off by seeing if we can just agree that there's a problem. Dan, as a viewer and as a man who's worked in this sector, how deep is the problem of a lack of diversity?
I think it's big, but what I believe very passionately is that the right thing is not to view it as a problem, because I don't think it's not a problem to be solved. It's a solution. It's a solution to businesses' desire to be more successful. And the reason I say that is because there's just now countless studies which show very, very clearly a direct link between having a more diverse workforce and better commercial results. And that happens because more diverse groups have a wider variety of ideas, and that improves creativity and that improves innovation. And those things generally lead to more business success. And I must say, we see that on a day-by-day basis in our organisation. Channel 4 has got an extremely diverse workforce. We obviously, over the years, have a good reputation, I think, on air for championing diversity. And indeed, some of Channel 4's sort of biggest moments in our life has been where diversity has been at the centre, whether that was the Brookside Lesbian Kiss or Slumdog Millionaire, or more recently the Paralympics. And we try to, quite a lot of our programmes now, diversity is the theme. So a programme like The Undateables would be a good example of that. But we also just try to mix diversity into the weft and warp of all of our programmes, whether that be Channel 4 News or Hollyoaks or Come Dine With Me or Gogglebox. If you look carefully, you will see that the casting of all those programmes or the contributors to them are extremely diverse. The big thing I think that we have done recently is been much more systematic about what happens behind the scenes. So 2 years ago, we published something called a diversity charter, which aims through 30 different initiatives to transform the diversity, continue to transform it on air, but in particular behind the scenes, in production and in our headquarters. And we're getting some absolutely amazing results with that.
OK. Well, Michelle, I mean, Dan's a public service broadcaster. To some extent, he has to do this. It's what Channel 4's set up to do. You have very straightforward commercial concerns. Yeah. So, to what extent do you see that there is a lack of diversity, and is that a problem?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much where Dan is. So there is a definite lack of diversity in the industry. But I very much see that it's a solution. And we have a wonderful case study of that. So the Maltesers, wonderful Maltesers brand, we haven't managed to have effective advertising on that brand, i.e. advertising that drives sales, for 8 years, until we made the ads that featured women with disability. And for the first time, and I happened yesterday, so I was in London for the debrief of the results of that advertising, and they're outstanding. I mean, I was emailing our global head of marketing to share, this is what happens when you put disability or when you put diversity into the heart of your communications. Because there's a whole population of people we've not connected with, and as a commercial marketeer who wants results, that's a gift, actually. The opportunity in a mature market to talk to people who haven't felt talked to or communicated with or represented is a gift. So is it important? Definitely. Is it a problem? Yes. But much more exciting for me is thinking about it as an opportunity.
So what did it show? I mean, share with us as much as you can.
Yeah.
In terms of the
actual commercial
reality.
Results. OK. I mean, so what you do is you say, if you compare the people who haven't seen the ads with the people who have seen the ads, and it's a massive quantitative study, so this is real, this is like the science bit.
Can we just check?
Does that make sense?
Do you know what we're talking about with the Maltesers? Have you seen the Maltesers ads? Just put your hand up. Yeah, fine, OK, we all know what we're talking about. Right.
We basically, and bear in mind, there's lots of chocolate sold in the UK, and we basically got a 10% increase in sales. 10%. Commercially, that's huge for the people who'd seen the ads. But also, we got 20% of people saying they felt closer to the brand. We wanted to get, we targeted 1 million YouTube views. In 24 hours, without putting any paid spend behind it, we got over 1 million, and we're now over 2 million. So if you look at every single lens, and then there's the untangible benefits. So I do a lot of graduate recruitment, and I notice the difference of the grads that come in who say, oh, yeah, you made the Maltesers ads. That's the kind of business I want to be a part of. So the commercials are very direct, but the really exciting thing is the indirect benefit as well.
So the point is it made non-disabled people feel closer to the brand because you were featuring disabled actresses?
Yes.
That's really interesting.
That's the fact.
I think that deserves a round of applause.
Nishma, do you feel this is I mean, I've been chairing discussions like this in television, about television, for decades, literally. Is advertising a bit behind?
Absolutely. So I think the challenge that exists is that advertising hasn't necessarily kept pace with the reality of how diverse new generations and people are and the expectations are. I'm sure we'll discuss the many reasons why, but the reality of the reasons why platforms like YouTube are more reflective and more diverse is they are powered by individuals. So there is not someone deciding what's there and what's popular, it's actually people choosing it. Advertising is still very much at the point of believing that it's reflecting culture, but the reality is actually it needs to go much further than that and say how does it push it further on. So at the moment, the majority of advertising is still featuring what would be considered the stereotypes or actually not considering any diversity at all.
And why do you think it's happened?
So I think if you look particularly first at the talent pot, so look at the most recent data that the IPA, and I think the IPA under Tom Knox's leadership have done an incredible job of starting with the data and actually saying how deep is the problem. It's something that at Google we did this as well several years ago, because in order to fix the diversity problem, we need to understand the extent of it. So looking at the makeup of workforces and agencies and trying to understand, first of all, how diverse are those teams? And then, most importantly, understanding why is there a lack of diversity. Is it around the available talent? which may point to education and the programmes there? Is it around bias in the way that we recruit? Is it a fact that there is actually, we are building teams of people that look like ourselves rather than pushing the boundaries and understanding, really, what do our customers, what are the people that we're selling to and telling stories to want and look like? New generations are more diverse than they've ever been, but actually advertising, the industry, the businesses aren't reflective of that.
Hamza, can you tell us about your experience, first of all? I mean, how did you do what you were doing, and what do you think the relevance is to what we're talking about?
I mean, yeah, hey guys. I kind of started, I wanted to be an actor, a comedian, and when I was growing up, I did everything. I went to performing arts, I went to drama school, I did all of that. And then afterwards, like a lot of my friends, my acting friends, they would like go out for auditions, you know, Coronation Street in the background, you know, pushing a shopping trolley, one of those ones. And, you know, I kind of realised straight away, don't want to pull out the race card, but I found out straight away that, you know, I was getting stereotyped in those typical roles, you know, like playing terrorist number 2, you know? Just one line, Allahu Akbar, bang, and then that's it. No callbacks, no sequels, no nothing, you know?
Did you find those career progressions as maybe terrorist number 1?
Yeah, that's where the money is at. Yeah. Terrorist number 1. Yeah. That's what I really wanted. I was like, don't discriminate. I can do it. But then, yeah, I kind of wanted to do my own thing. I kind of wanted to. I don't want to sound rude, but I didn't feel that certain channels are just going to turn around and say, "Oh, here you go, Hamza. We know you're talented. Here's a show." So I kind of did it myself. So I made a YouTube channel, and it was literally just a video in my bedroom, not that kind of video, and yeah, and I just went with it, and I think six years on, I think I have over 78 million views and counting. And now I'm in an amazing position where, you know, brands can come to me, and TV channels are coming to me now. Whereas before it was much harder, well, for myself anyway, because, yeah, I mean.
And who's your audience? I mean, it's obviously a lot of terrorists and radicals and.
Yeah, the sweet ones. No, it's. I mean, it started off kind of like I started this thing called Diary of a Bad Man, which was about a young kind of British Asian Muslim in London growing up, trying to be a gangster, but he's not. He gets, you know, beaten up by his mum, girls. Basically, my life and my real life, and yeah, and I just. I did that, and it was obviously appealing to a lot of the Muslim audience and a lot of Asians, but then. You know, I kind of even said, you know, I need to kind of appeal to the white people and, you know, and everyone else. And I tried to kind of, you know, I made it more universal. And then a lot of, you know, young kids from different kind of backgrounds and cultures. Because comedy is universal. So it doesn't matter what skin tone, kind of, you know, what age you're at or, you know, whatever it is, everyone appreciates comedy. So I've got a great audience now. I'm very lucky and fortunate to have it.
I mean, Dan, this drives basically to the heart of what diversity is about, isn't it? Because it's about who you're appealing to. I mean, do you do diversity because you want to appeal to Muslims and disabled people and, you know, lesbians or whichever minority group you might want to pick out? Or do you do that because you're reflecting the country you serve and that appeals to everybody?
Well, it's both. And, you know, we also have, as part of our public service remit given to us by Parliament, a job to champion minorities, which we've always done. But, to be honest, that sort of implies that there's some kind of statutory incentive that is making us do it. I think, you know, we would do it because of the results we see. And that, whether that is on air or behind the scenes. I do think the absolute key to representation, whether that be in advertising or in TV programmes and films, is the diversity of the people who are making them. That is absolutely the key. And I think that is... I mean, Una King, who now works for YouTube, who used to work for Channel 4, she always used to say to me, look, no one gets up in the morning in the television industry and thinks, right, how do I keep black and disabled people out of the television industry today? People just don't think like that. But there's a big difference between that and actively thinking, I want a more diverse workforce. And that, you know, we have been doing that in the last couple of years. And I would say to you, you know, things like targets really, really work. Now, I know people have different opinions about that. But all I can say is they work. You know, since we have had our charter, the number of new joiners coming into Channel 4 who are BAME has gone up by 50%. And no one's being asked to hit a particular quota. Everyone is being asked to carry on hiring on the basis of merit, purely on the basis of merit.
But explain, why do you think targets work?
Because I think that what they force people to do is to think about the whole process of hiring from even before you've even started in a different way. So there's this awful word pre-attraction, but if you're thinking about who might be the kinds of people who you want to join your organisation before you've even got a vacancy, that makes a big issue, and it's extremely flattering for the people who you identify through that process. But then when you go out and put together, you advertise and whatever, use recruitment agencies, if you're asking for more diverse range of candidates, you get a more diverse range of candidates. You then get a greater diversity of people on shortlists and being interviews. And all I can tell you is that even when you say to people, just keep hiring on the basis of merit, when you get a different set of people coming in at the front end, you get a different set of results at the end. And then when you get those people in your organisation, they then produce more creativity, and that produces better commercial results. It is absolutely clear-cut that is the way that it works. The other thing that happens, which is unexpected, is that you not only, if you have people who are more different, they bring a different set of ideas and points of view, but also it puts everyone on their game a bit more, because it's a messy business when you have more disagreements in that kind of environment, and that's why an inclusive culture is equally as important as diversity. But what happens is that if I know I'm going into a creative process where there's going to be more competition for different ideas, I work harder to sell my own, but I also listen harder to yours, and I'm more likely to incorporate a part of your idea into my idea, and that's where you get hybrids, and that's where you get innovation.
I was just going to say, we, on the back of the Maltesers' work being successful, we went out and spoke to consumers. So we commissioned a massive piece of research. So consumers, people who eat our chocolate.
People,
basically people,
yeah.
Humans, people with mouths. I actually have heard it described as that once. You're saying, are you trying to attract just those people who are with disability, or are you trying to talk to everyone? And we went to villages, not just cities, because diversity is very different wherever you go. We spoke to people living who felt marginalised, and those who considered themselves, and I use the words advisedly, more mainstream. And the really interesting thing is, the general public, humans, they're 3 steps ahead of us. So, whether they're, whatever background they're from, they're saying, from a brand point of view, we expect businesses to do this, because governments aren't quite doing it enough for us at the moment. So we want brands, the brands that we buy from the supermarket, we want them to be representative. So it was fantastic for us to see that the most important people to us, the people that pay in the business I'm in, that pay my salary, are out there demanding that we are more inclusive. And I think what's interesting is, if you're inclusive about one thing, it makes me, who may have a different... We all think in our minds, I think every single human has something about them that they feel isn't quite acceptable. And so if you accept something, then everyone feels, well, maybe they'll accept me and my personal quirk. So inclusivity, well, by definition, is not just about talking to people who are Muslim or black or women, but is about saying, we accept you. And that's the key.
But is this a rather London conversation? I mean, does it make sense to be more inclusive in metropolitan cities than in Cornwall, in your advertising?
Does it make sense? It's definitely easier to be inclusive in metropolitan cities than it is when you get out. However, it's like there's a lag. The intention, where the consumers we spoke to, the humans we spoke to, told us that that's what they would like to happen in their communities. It's just more difficult, because just like, if you imagine it, you walk down Brick Lane, you see it, don't you? You see diversity. We were walking, I brought my mum, by the way, today. We were walking down Brick Lane, and we were saying, we see diversity everywhere. You walk down the village I was raised in West Sussex, and you don't see it.
Yeah.
So if you're not seeing it on your street, you've got to see it on your screen.
So might you fear, as an advertiser, that people in where you grew up would be alienated by a black, disabled, lesbian
quite the
marketing
opposite.
campaign?
I think you've got a responsibility because they're not seeing it so much on their streets to show it on the TV that they watch, on Hollyoaks or on the YouTube channels, or hopefully on the Mars adverts that they watch. Quite the opposite.
Because the other thing, of course, is that there's so much diversity that is not visible. You know, you will all be much more diverse than we can see, and that is particularly true with disabilities. You know, non-visible disabilities, particularly mental health. I mean, hopefully we'll come onto this. It's just a massive iceberg. It's a massive, massive taboo in the world, but certainly in this country.
Nishma, were you going to add something?
Yeah, I just think it's that point around the data. So to your point, actually, you know, advertising has always, you know, done a brilliant job, as demonstrated in the exhibition here, of reflecting culture. But actually, does advertising need to go further and saying, actually, advertising has a responsibility to shift society behaviour? So in rural areas where actually maybe they don't see as much diversity, advertising, TV, media, film has that responsibility to be more reflective. And I think, actually, in this day and age where in a digital world where we do have much more data available to us so that marketeers can have a better understanding of people's behaviour and what they do and find talent like people like Hamza and all of the breadth of the creators on the YouTube platform who are actually genuinely reflecting what's happening. I think that's the golden opportunity. It isn't a reductive conversation for me. I think agencies and brands should see this as a huge opportunity to be more successful.
Hamza, I mean, a lot of these people are coming to you now.
Yeah.
Including, I mean, the BBC and the police. And I mean, what do you feel the attitude, the underlying attitude is? Is it that you're safe because you work?
Yeah.
Or, you know, that you're already established?
I guess so. In some ways, yes. I kind of, like I was talking to one of my friends who's also an Asian actor, and I was feeling, I know it sounds really, it's quite sad because when he was telling me his story of how hard it is for him to kind of break into the mainstream, I just realised that, you know, it's still, like, in my opinion, that we are still going in the right direction. I don't think that, you know, diversity, and this is me saying it, I don't think that, it's really, really bad, you know, it's terrible. No, we're actually making the right movements, but I just feel that it's too slow. You know, we're not where we should be at this day and age. And you know, what you were saying about alienating, I mean, I think it's just when these brands kind of, when they come to me, they understand that they are appealing to other parts of the community, which is actually so cool because, as an example, I made a joke in one of my videos like about 5 years ago about Nike making a hijab, the Nike hijab, yeah? And I think yesterday they kind of announced, and my Twitter was going crazy, and I was like, no one uses Twitter anymore. Why is people tweeting me? and no offence, Twitter users. But yeah, and I was checking, and I was like, oh my God, they did that. And in terms of like the kind of the Muslim community, they were like, oh, that is so cool. I mean, even though I made the idea up like 6-7 years ago, wherever it was, but they, you know, and I will sue Nike. If you're here. No, I'm joking. But yeah, and you know, another thing, like, you know, the Amazon advert. I don't know if anyone remembers that happened recently about the kind of Muslim imam and the kind of that was beautiful. And you know, like, you don't even have to be Muslim or Christian or anything to kind of appreciate it. It was just like it showed where we should be in this day and age. That kind of respect and that appreciation. And when brands do that, they don't understand how powerful that campaign would be, rather than just doing a normal advert that doesn't have kind of a cultural significance or something, you know, a bit different or a bit diverse.
Can I throw it open to you, actually, as we go along? If any thoughts you have about what we're talking about, or if you want to change the subject, do just put your hand up and I'll bring you into the conversation. Does anybody want to raise anything at this stage? Don't be shy. Don't just because you're the first person of the morning. Okay, I'll carry on. Just to be a little bit controversial, well, I mean, the thing is, how you're all being very positive. The question is, does this industry really think the same way? If you think about the Gustavo Martineau's case. Is it fine for him to come back into the industry?
Sorry, which case did you say?
Gustavo Martinez.
Right.
We're going to be talking to Martin Sorrell in the next session, by the way. But
I'm embarrassed. I don't know what that example is. What was the example?
Oh, well, in that case, I won't move on. If I have to explain it, yeah, forget it. It's fine. Because I'll get sued. Because I'll say the wrong thing. I'll say the wrong thing, and I'll quote the wrong thing. But what I mean is, I live in a very white establishment part of London, in Richmond, and quite a few sort of senior men in advertising live around me, and on a Saturday morning, the dads are on the football touchline discussing the world. And what I get quite a lot of, in fact, I got last night when I was talking to a couple of them about this session, was, why is the industry so white male dominated? And one of them said, well, the thing you've got to understand is, advertising is a real ego business. It's about strong ideas being forced on people under extreme circumstances to tight budgets, and you've got to be a bit of a bully, and men are just better at that. Now, that surely is probably quite a widespread attitude amongst middle-aged white men in advertising.
That's unfortunate. That's unfortunate if it is.
I also think, Jimmy, and I can see Karen, I can see Claudine here, we have a lot of amazing female leaders of ad agencies. Still not enough, and it's still not pervasive enough. In the creative industry, it is now 13% in terms of ECD. So again, not enough. I think those behavioural traits, personally speaking, I think it's actually more comfortable to believe you don't need to change. I think the white male leaders who think that is why would they want to change the status quo that suits them? But the reality is the businesses that will be defined by the new talent that comes in is they won't choose those businesses and those cultures. They will choose the ones that are led by real people, modern individuals who are really driving change. So I think the industry has got to be braver and bolder in terms of making those shifts. But I think there's also, for everyone that thinks like that, there are many that don't. We talked about Tom Knox's braveness, I think, in terms of making the industry say, let's be accountable and let's do it. There are so many more individuals in the industry who want to change, but I think more needs to be done to support the action. The awareness is there, what can we drive action? And I think that's all the way through.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, I really applaud the measurement, and I applaud the thing that Lloyd's did bring out their survey. But with the statistics that are measured, you're measuring gender and ethnicity. You're not measuring sexuality. You're not measuring disability. You're not, as far as I can see, measuring social mobility. So there's an area to move into, and measuring is really, really important because it tells you what it is that you're dealing with. I think that the thing which I still am amazed about is that it's a creative business. The basic product that is being produced is a creative product, and diversity gives more creativity. So it amazes me, actually, that from what I can see, client companies, particularly larger multinationals, because they've got large HR departments, because they've got a different kind of attitude at a leadership level on a global basis, are actually more advanced on this issue than agencies are, which is a sort of, you'd think it would be the other way around. And I can understand that in the agency world, particularly if you're a smaller agency, you don't necessarily have a large HR department. But I just think that the absolutely critical thing is, although I think there is a moral imperative personally, and I also think there's just a sort of common sense imperative of representing your customers and your potential customers, it's just that it makes you more creative, and creativity is the business you're in.
And I have to say, the more senior women we have in the clients, and not just women, more people who don't want to be bullied in meetings. I have sat opposite people like that trying to sell me an idea, and I can tell you it doesn't work. So I think we need to, if the client is more diverse, then the agency will have to be more diverse, because those selling techniques and tactics will not work in the future. And I think but there is one thing I think we're not talking about, and there is an area about this, having been through the experience of making communications that feature diversity, it can be quite awkward. It can be quite difficult. When you're talking about disability, for example, when we were doing the Maltesers ads, you don't know what to say. Are you going to offend someone when you're casting? There's a whole space that when you're talking about ethnicity, I'm a white woman, I worry I'm going to say the wrong is it Afro-Caribbean, is it this? And the fear, I think we have to surface that fear, because the fear of, I was going to swear, I'm not allowed to swear, the fear of getting it wrong stops progress. So there's this great intention, and then you're so busy at work, we all know, we've got so much to do, and you think, oh shit, but there you go. If I get it wrong, the risk is too high, and so I'm just not going to go there. I'll go over here. This is safe instead. So I want us to be able to talk about the fact that we're worried about causing offence, and we're worried about upsetting people.
So is there enough research? I mean, this industry used to be a lot about focus. Go to Sheffield, do a focus group, talk to people.
No, there isn't enough research. And I mean, even one of the things we're now realising is even the people that we research. Look at who you recruit for your research groups. Are you recruiting diversely, or are you going back to some place in Hammersmith that you've been to for the last 15 years to run your focus groups and getting the same group of women that you always get for us in chocolate? So I think there isn't enough research. I think we're starting to see that research because you see the results. So if you, from a very commercial perspective, if you can see that this is going to make you more money, you're going to invest more money into understanding more about it.
Because if you want to answer that question nowadays, most people will go on Google and say, is it Afro-Caribbean or coloured or black?
Yes, that's true, yeah.
What the hell does Google know? Yes.
Hi, I'm Grayson from YouTube. We've talked quite a lot about physical diversity, but obviously there's a big divide at the moment around political diversity, which has been globally felt. I just wondered what your point of view is on that and how you guys deal with that.
That's a good one. Who wants to pick that up? Dan? Yeah.
In television, we try to represent all points of view. Indeed, that's part of Channel 4's job, is to represent alternative points of view. I mean, I don't like Trump. I'll be straightforward about that. I don't like lots of the things he said, and I'm sure most people would be the same in this country. But the good news is people say, well, are we going backwards? And I think that, a lot of those views, as expressed very publicly by someone powerful, is a backward step. The positive thing, as I see it, is that millennials' identity and diversity seem to be an even more disproportionately aspect of their existence and their belief system than in older generations, and they are the future. So all I see is relentless progress, and this hopefully is a bit of a blip.
What's behind your question? I mean, do you mean that diversity has to also include the diversity of view that says?
I feel like the advertising industry is very liberal in their points of view, myself included. But I'm from the north originally, and I certainly know that in Brexit I was quite surprised that actually a lot of millennials didn't share my liberal viewpoints. And I think it's possibly the same in America, that a lot of middle America did vote for Trump, and they included millennials. And so I'm definitely all about the liberal anti-Trump establishment, but actually sometimes just showing that doesn't actually help engage those people who are feeling disenfranchised or frustrated for whatever reason and potentially not embracing
that's what I was kind of asking before about this being a London conversation, that sort of, is there a risk that you all buy into a set of values that alienates a lot of people out there who just don't agree?
I think that from an industry point of view, I think there can be. Actually, are we as an advertising industry, do agencies go far enough in terms of seeking that research and the opinion? I think if I was to look at it from the YouTube platform point of view, and I think about the creators, which is universal, we build products for everyone, and therefore we're not determining how they're used, and particularly YouTube is used in terms of amplifying voices. I would say actually there is a diversity of voice on there and a range of opinions, and there is the opportunity for particularly those to kind of voice it, people like Hamza who are making that social difference. So I think, yes, I think the agency, the ad industry can be very metropolitan in terms of its view, and that's the difficulty. How do we go out and actually really listen and engage with the real creators and the storytellers out there?
Hamza?
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add on that, on political diversity? I mean, I think it's a genuine challenge because, you know, we are now sort of under some pressure to interview every dickhead out there, basically.
But that's good. I mean, the series that in Fake News where you interviewed those characters from the alt-right, you know, that was good.
You made that connection, I didn't. But, you know, yeah, go on. Yeah.
But that was good. It's flushed these crazy views out into the open, and I think that is, in some ways, you know, if there is a popular groundswell for them, it's better that they be out in the open and be challenged and debated.
But, yeah, I mean, I can see that in terms of news and current affairs and the debate on YouTube or wherever it might be. But does that also have to infect your world?
Well, the great news is chocolate transcends politics.
It's everything, yeah.
However, interestingly, when we did this research, there are a lot of people who don't feel represented, and it doesn't. And you know, I did take a great example in the Lloyd's research of single parents. I think it's 25% of parents are single parents, but was it like 12% or even less, I think, that are actually ever represented in advertising? So, you know, when we talk about diversity, working class, northern accents in advertising, you know, when I talk about diversity, we're talking about the big headline things. There are lots of ways we can make... I prefer the word inclusivity to the word diversity, personally, because I think... And frankly, as someone whose business is about, you know, lots of little transactions of sales to the whole population, we have to talk to the whole population. And that means, you know, everybody, and represent everybody in the country. We don't need to talk about their politics. We're a chocolate brand. But we do need to make sure that people aren't feeling that the whole world is full of a perfectly white middle-class family who are, you know, sat around the dinner table chatting to each other and, you know, enjoying a chocolate every now and again. That's not feasible anymore.
Yeah. I mean, just kind of like from my viewpoint, like obviously I do videos that have like moral messages, and I've done loads of things, whether it's like knife crime or you know, bullying, you know, Islamophobia, whatever it is. I always try to get my hands kind of dirty, but at the same time I never wanted to be kind of like a puppet, a kind of like a propaganda tool, just because like I don't want certain brands to use me for their kind of, you know, political gain or, you know, wherever it is. But one thing that I do kind of appreciate was YouTube allowed me to have my voice. So the things that I'm passionate about, like as an example, we were just talking about this at the back. There were 3 girls who went to Syria. This was about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And you know, they became like jihadi brides and they went off to Syria. Now, a lot of people in the industry that are Muslim, obviously they shy away from those kind of things, you know, because it's not really... You don't really want to get your hands dirty. You don't want to go there. You know, you don't want to talk about, you know, things like ISIS, and you know, it's horrible because especially with the backlash. But for me, I had a voice and I understood like you know, I was working with the Metropolitan Police, and you know, I did so many different types of campaigns to kind of spread my voice and I knew that there was a community out there that needed my voice, and YouTube allowed me to do that. And even with the police, they came to me and they allowed me to kind of spread that positive message. And I think in the last year, I've been, I think, to over 130 schools. I performed to over like 80 to 90,000 kids to just keep them safe and just try to do good and spread a positive message that I had the ability to do. So,
yes.
Hi, Rack from Auto Trader. I have a question just about regionality, and Michelle, I totally agree we have a care of duty. When the message has been broad, take, for example, the political situation that we've been in over the last year or so, 50% haven't agreed. So just wondering whether actually a different approach or a targeted approach could be something that solves that.
Nishma, do you want to...
Well, I think that, you know, for our sentiment, it's about we talk about follow the data, not the stereotypes. So I would say, actually, can you have a better understanding of all the consumers, you know? So there was the 50% that weren't represented, you know, was that true in terms of looking at the advertising around that time? So do we really understand, you know, from your point of view, you've got customers all around this country, how much of that depth of understanding have you got? And I think platforms where you can target and understand actual people's genuine behaviour and who's influencing their behaviour and what they think and see is actually what we need to understand better. So I think there is still a lack of use around the targeting and a use of the understanding of what people really think.
Is there a big sort of untapped potential from technology and data in terms of addressing diversity?
Well, technology is an enabler to be able to, and the data that's there is going to enable advertisers and agencies to have a better understanding. I think it's about making sure that the data is being used in the right way, but it's interpreted and used in terms of that creative process as well. So it's great to have data. It's how do you use it, and how do you use that smartly to inform those decisions.
Yes, Michelle, you don't have anything to add on that?
I guess slightly contrary to their point of targeting, to what extent do we end up with filter bubbles that people are just reflected in what they're seeing and it looks like them? If we go down that route that the data can drive, do you end up doing a disservice to people who you write off as, oh, they're a Brexiter, therefore they are X, Y and Z? It's a delicate balance, isn't it, to kind of generate?
I think I'm just trying to check I'm understanding conversation. This is about the kind of concept of the echo chamber, isn't it? That you only see the stuff that reinforces your own opinion of the world. Yeah, it's interesting. I think the learning I talk from the perspective of brands, and I think a lot of people in the room work with brands. From a brand point of view, you have to be really careful. Of course you can do programmatic, you can be targeted, but you've got to be true to your brand. Otherwise, the whole story falls apart. So you can't have one message for person A and another message for person B, because then these brands, there's the equity we have as businesses. I mean, believe it or not, Maltesers has been around 90 years. It has to have a consistency to it at its heart. So I think the whole conversation about social media and echo chambers is a massive one, but it's slightly different.
But do you have to? I mean, given your chocolate, and everybody likes chocolate, do you have to have... Do you still have to have a brand value that you're selling in order to sell the chocolate?
You do have to have a value, but you don't have to have a political point of view. I mean, I don't think people expect chocolate brands, I don't know, do you? But to be political, what they expect them to be is progressive, inclusive, because that's what people have told us. But I don't think you'd go, Mars is conservative, and Maltesers, that's definitely Lib Dem, or that's not a currency that we kind of play with. So I just think you have to, whatever you do, however much you are into targeted media, you have to. Whether you're a brand yourself as a person, or whether you're a brand like a chocolate brand, you have to be true to what your core values are, don't you?
Yes.
I just wanted to know, do you think modern political correctness is stifling creativity in advertising, and how would you go about confronting this?
Who wants to take Dan?
I'm just trying to work out the question.
What do you mean?
As in, how would you best confront the issue of diversity without perhaps the filter of political correctness, and how would you best confront the issues we have today?
I suppose I just don't see the world through the lens of political correctness. I just see the world through the lens of people. And, people are fantastically different. And so if they exist in the world, they should exist in all of our forms of portrayal of the world, whether that be in advertising or television or film or whatever. So, I mean... Trevor Phillips, he did a programme in which, he said that he thinks political correctness has gone too far, and that it has led to a stifling of the expression of people's views. And that may or may not be so, and that clearly is Trevor's view. I just think it's as simple as this. If it's in life, it should be in the stuff that we do.
Are you asking that because you're saying there's a risk that you would look like you're being just politically correct in running an ad with a diverse population?
There is a bit of it, I think, actually. So I'll give you an example. We're doing some work with Snickers and Gay Star News and supporting Pride and supporting a page that we're about to announce where we support people coming out and being who they want to be. And when we were talking to the agency about the creative development for that, the question I wanted to ask was, have you got any creative teams who themselves have been through the experience of coming out that could work on this? That's a kind of obvious question to ask. but I had to go through a few mental leaps to know whether that was okay. And so maybe it's my own, maybe you're much more liberated than I am, and that's my own barriers. And it is, of course, it's okay to say it. But I think we all have to trust that we're trying to do the right thing. And sometimes we might the intention is the most important thing along the way. So try it. And trust that people will see the intention behind why you're trying it. So we're all being very. There are elements where you have to be, and maybe because I work in industry, it's slightly less London and Shoreditch and all the rest of it, where you do have to just be a bit brave and say, I'm just going to say it because I know my intent is good, and I know, and then hopefully people see beyond the slightly clumsy way I may choose to express myself.
We're coming to the end, so I just wanted to do a minute each on where you think we're going to be in 10 years' time. I mean, Dan, we never got a chance to talk about mental health, but I wonder if you think that is one of the bits of diversity that we may start tackling next.
I do. I think as I said, I think it's an iceberg. Disability generally, 20% of the population is disabled. You wouldn't believe that from watching television or watching films. That's a massive issue. I think the first step is to start trying to measure things. So that you can see what the real picture is. Last year we had a year of disability. We started the year with 3% of our workforce disclosing as disabled. By the end of the year, it was at 11%, that's extremely high. The reason was that we did a whole campaign about creating a more permissive culture in which people could feel that they could stick up their hand and say, I've got a disability, and then receive support and the necessary adjustments for it. That's a massive jump, and it's a massive jump because the 8% difference, which is about 100 people inside Channel 4, are people who have got non-visible, often mental health-related impairments. And that is often related to things like depression, and people now feel that they're able to come forward. So if I could say one thing to you all as a starting point, is that if you don't measure the diversity of your own staff, please do so. And I think that what you will find is that there are many more disabled people in your organisation than you think that there are.
Thank you.
I think there's two things. I think there's one that in 10 years' time, if I was to leap forward, the cultural influence of everyday people, real people, people like Hamza and others on the platform, like YouTube and others, that will be reflected and will become the norm. They become popular culture, they are now, and will grow in importance. So it's almost impossible for advertising to not be reflective of that. I think from a talent point of view, 10 years on, yes, we will have made progress. At its current pace, not enough. So I hope that in the conversations that we continue to have and we keep having and we should keep having, we can accelerate the pace. But there is a reality around education and skills that actually we all need to now start dealing with and addressing in order to feel that in 10 years' time, we don't need to have this conversation.
I know, my personal opinion is, I don't know where we will be at in 10 years' time. But one thing that I do know is we are actually halfway there because we address that there is a problem. There is a lack of diversity, with everything, ageism and not enough females or not enough people with different skin tones. I mean, there's a problem there. That's why we're here today. We're talking about it and how we can improve that. So I think that knowing that we are aware of this, that at least gives me confidence that we can take a step in the right direction and we can kind of not force it, but understand that this, especially for ad campaigns, this can actually benefit you guys, and this actually can, not, I don't know it sounds cheesy, but it's not just a responsibility, but also this actually can help in so many ways, whether it's, making more money for your company or just kind of being a cooler brand or just kind of like showing that we are very diverse and, we're united. There's so many ways that we can benefit from this. So I think we're halfway there, and I think that's a positive thing, and that's what I take from it. Anyway.
Sure.
I'm an optimist, and so I hope the grassroots stuff that I know a lot of people here are doing about getting apprenticeships, scholarships, getting the people around the table to be more diverse means in 10 years' time we'll be having the 110 years of advertising. And we look at those ads now about women, going, oh, welcome home, darling, I've got the dinner ready, and all the rest of it. And we go, oh, my God, I can't believe they could do that. We'll be there going, oh, my God, look at those ads. Everyone's white and, they're all married and they're all straight and able-bodied. It's crazy. And we won't believe that was the environment. So that's my hope. And we won't have to have discussions like this.
Thank you all very much indeed. We're going to take a break now, ladies and gentlemen. At 12:15, we're going to be talking about the future, the next 100 years of advertising with Martin Sorrell, David Abraham and Ronan Harris from Google. So I hope you can join us then. Would you like to come on, gentlemen? Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this session. This is a sort of 100 years, the next 100 years in an hour.
Feels like 100.
Yeah. And we have a stellar panel for you. Of course, Sir Martin Sorrell, who doesn't really need an introduction, I'm sure, from most of you, but I'll do one anyway. Sir Martin founded WPP in 1985 and has been its chief executive for more than 30 years. And today, WPP is the largest advertising and marketing services group in the world, winning Creative Holding Company of the Year at Cannes for 6 years in a row, and most effective in the FE Global Effectiveness Index for the 5th year running. WPP employs over 200,000 people in more than 3,000 offices in 113 countries. Next to Sir Martin, Ronan Harris is MD of Google UK. Before that, he was VP of Google EMEA and head of Google's operations in Ireland. He joined Google in 2005, and since then he's focused on growing the company's online advertising sales across EMEA and also launched several other Google products in the region. And on the end, my boss, David Abraham, became Channel 4's 6th chief executive in May 2010.
This is real conflict of interest.
Absolutely, that's why I've declared it.
Wow, that's the way it's like. Oh, my word.
He gets the hardest time, usually, is the tradition. Now, he devised a strategy to transform Channel 4 and has steered the corporation through a period of creative overhaul. It's seen record investments in programming, resulting in more major industry awards in the past 3 years than in Channel 4's history, and the first increase in all-time viewing share in almost a decade. Now, he's led the business into a long-term period of sustainability with revenues above £900 million for 5 consecutive years.
That was a longer intro than either Ronan's or mine. I object. I object.
It was the same length as yours. Now, most of you, I imagine, or many of you at least, were here for the previous
forecast
session.
that you will go far.
Why do you think I'm here? It's not for you.
I was trying to figure it out.
The last session was about diversity. I'm sure many of you were here. So I thought with the bosses on the stage, it would be worth just beginning with a question about that, really just to sort of round off this thought. And I know David and Ronan were here for the last session, and there was a sort of a feeling, David, in the room that there was a long way to go, but the advertising was sort of now making strides and only beginning to get the idea or the proposition that this is a commercial benefit rather than a problem to solve.
Look, absolutely. I think, the data that really made a big, powerful effect on me was looking at diversity amongst younger people in the UK versus older people. And there's just no doubt about it. There's a bulge, there's a generation coming through in the UK that are profoundly more diverse on every level than older generations. And so the future of this country is, by definition, more diverse. So whatever market you're in, and obviously we're in the entertainment and the provision of public information, we have got to think in new ways about how to engage a group which is significantly more diverse in the future than it has been historically.
The future of this country was going to be less diverse given what happened on June 23rd.
Well, that may be attitudinally where we are in a political debate, but actually in terms of the...
Not attitudinally, David, factually. I mean, if we're going to have restriction of movement of people, this country will become less diverse.
We shall see, but the statistics are very clear. If you're a teenager in Britain today, you're 3 or 4 times more likely to come from a diverse background than if you're age over 65. So that's just the wave that's coming through. Now, that might be about to change in another few decades because of Brexit.
That's backward-looking. It's not forward-looking. So forward-looking, the likelihood is it will be less diverse. So I think that's one of the tragedies about what happened last year.
Yeah, it may well be. But
I think is looking increasingly unlikely of being reversible.
But we do know that most of the people who are already here are likely to be staying here.
We don't know that. We don't know that. 17% of the 16,000 people in this country that are part of WPP here in this country are from the EU or are EU citizens. They don't know. That's precisely the point.
But the children of the immigrants who are representing this diversity wave, they're staying. That's a fact.
I'm a second-generation immigrant. I don't know where
pretty much a
second generation.
I'm fresh off the boat, but I'm hoping to come back to next year's anniversary.
Well, you'll be going back to Ireland. But no, I think this is one of the biggest issues. I mean, just coming back to the overall position from our point of view, we were talking about this in the green room. If I look at WPP as a whole, of the 200,000 people, about 53% are women. So if we're talking about ticking boxes, which unfortunately this is what a lot of it leads to, we would tick that. If we go to the and it's a bad phraseology, if we go to middle levels, women are still around 50%, and I'm just picking one aspect of diversity. If we get to the so-called senior levels, whatever that means, it's down to about a third, a little bit better than a third. That's where the problem is. And I wasn't at the previous session, but I got the gist, that people were bemoaning the progress, and I think we all agreed that there's not enough progress. But that's the big issue. So the thing that we saw this week with the Vodafone re-entry program, which is a specific program to encourage women. There was that Turkish lady who had gone off for 2 years to bring up her kids, came back, was a really stunningly fantastic story. So that type of program, which I think is at the heart of the problem, it's not the only type of thing, is really good. So I think we are changing. We all have our problems in this area. We've all had situations, I'm talking about the big agency groups, and indeed smaller businesses. We've all had problems in this area we've had to deal with, which has woken us up to the problem in many ways. But I think we are moving in the direction. Not fast enough, I'd agree, but we are moving.
I always worry when you get a panel like this talking about diversity, because we're probably not the most diverse group of people you could get on stage on the subject. I mean, in our company, it's been a big focus. And we have stuff to do internally within the company. So we've done things like make sure everybody in the organisation goes through unconscious bias training. Whether we like it or not, we all have biases. It's important to recognise them. We do a pretty good job for the most part, particularly across the business organisation. When we look at the technical side of the organisation, it's super tough. Super tough to get gender diversity, let alone any other sort of diversity. And when you analyse that problem, there's actually a problem in the supply chain, which goes all the way down to primary school kids, where the role models that are put in front of my 7-year-old daughter and 8-year-old son are actually reinforcing stereotypes before they even get going. So I think we've all got work to do at the beginning of the supply chain as well as within our businesses. And I think it's great to have the conversation front and centre. And for us all to be aware of it.
Let's go straight to what... Just one thing. Yeah. I don't come back to what David said, because the more I think about what you said, David, the more I disagree. No, because I was just thinking about America at the moment. I mean, whatever we think about, I think economically Trump probably, for the business community in America, is a good thing, certainly in the short to medium term. But, at other levels, and we're going through a second travel ban, which is, when I woke up this morning, I hear that is now being increasingly challenged. The simple fact, David, is on this whole area of diversity, the rise of populism and nationalism is going in completely the opposite direction. And looking at it, just thinking more about what your statistics, which are...
So are you going to yield to that? Is that what you're saying, that as politics moves...
No, I'm not going to yield to it, but I'm bemoaning the fact that it is there. And it's something, if we want to get serious about it, is something. We have an election coming up in Holland in a few days' time. We have an election coming up in France, and look at the candidates there. Somebody said, a French commentator said, in the shadow of the Eiffel Tower, I think it was on BBC, that a goat could beat Marine Le Pen. We'll see. Okay? Germany, what's going to happen to Angela Merkel? Not to forget what might happen in Spain or Greece or Italy. I mean, and a lot of this stuff, when we talk about diversity, is very much against it. So the thing that would worry me most in relation to diversity, it's not that we're going to go the other way, is the pressures that we see. Look at the pressures in the US at the moment. We have Iranian people, Iraqi people, Yemenis, Somalis, who come in and out. Some of them work in our business, some of them work in clients. There are people there from immigrant backgrounds who are nervous. And just coming back to what David and I said, we're both immigrants, basically, or I'm second-generation immigrant. You probably are the same. So my grandparents came from, lived here. We're in Brick Lane, East End of London, Stepney, right, in 1899. And when my mother died, I found their wedding certificate, which was re-registered, and they both signed with crosses. They came from the Ukraine. They couldn't speak a word of English. And the 4 witnesses signed with crosses. So I'm instinctively anti all this stuff. But I do think it's a very, very serious issue, which is going to become more of a problem, not less of a problem.
Well, what happens then to the industry in terms of the workforce? I mean, obviously we know that there are potential problems for financial services, for tech, in terms of moving people into Britain after Brexit. Do you think the advertising talent pool is going to become difficult after Brexit?
I think
in Britain.
It's a bit like squeezing a balloon, isn't it? Because there will be places of the world that will still be open. It's just going to be certain, basically EU countries where we're going to have, we don't know, but we may have problems. So I worry about 2 things. One is, what's our influence as a company in Germany, France, Italy, Spain? That's not to diminish the importance of the other EU countries, the other 23 countries. But just put the thing in perspective. We have 32,000 people in continental Europe, Western continental Europe, excluding CEE, Central and Eastern Europe, Russia, etc. So it's twice the size of the UK in terms of people. Germany is our 4th largest market. France is 6th. Spain is 9. Italy is 10. I worry about what companies in those countries think about, the Brits and that British company WPP. We have 2 French competitors, and I'm sure they're banging on the doors of many companies and saying, you don't want to deal with those. Similar to what President Hollande said. The Brits don't want to be a member of our club. Let them go. Don't do anything with it. So I worry about that. And then I worry about diversity in terms of having enough French, German, Italian, Spanish, Scandinavian, Portuguese, Greek, whatever, talent in the country, free flow of people. So,
David, what do you think the immediate post-Brexit impact is on... Let's assume freedom of movement is going to be difficult in some way.
Look, I think that there are some very technical issues in the creative industries around talent. So if you talk to people in the special effects industry that advertising, film and TV rely upon, I think probably about 1/3 of the people working in special effects in London are from Europe. So there are very real concerns around our ability to remain competitive and produce the quality of output at the right cost, given the fact that, for example, Hollywood increasingly relies upon the talent base and the resource base of London in particular to execute many of their projects. So I think that's a very specific example of concern where, in interacting with government, we're saying, listen, we need to really think this through. Otherwise, we're going to hobble a part of the creative industries that's actually globally really competitive. And there are tax breaks in place to advantage those industries as well that very quickly would be undermined by our inability to actually staff the jobs. But look, I think there's a sort of broader thing around what's happening politically with what's actually the reality of the demographics. And the fact is that we're still in the business of appealing to audiences. And what we know, and E4 is the biggest channel for 1634s in the UK, and Channel 4 is the youngest demographic terrestrial broadcaster in the UK, is that younger audiences are, by definition, attitudinally more diverse. Partly in terms of their ethnic background, but also partly in terms of attitude. And I think diversity of thought, which was a very strong part of the previous session, diversity of thinking, diversity of attitude, that ain't going away. And, wherever the political pendulum may be swinging right now, I've sort of got a kind of Hegelian view of history, which is, there is an underlying rhythm to this, which is society continues to progress in a progressive direction. And, we are dealing with forces right now which are primarily the forces of an aging population and the attitudes of aging demographics imposing themselves on political outcomes.
There's one thing that was very germane to this discussion, which we'll no doubt we'll get onto, which is going against that. And that is, I mean, this debate as to whether technology and advances technology creates employment or creates unemployment. My own view is that it creates unemployment, and that what you're going to see increasingly is a further hollowing out of the so-called middle class. I mean, that's a very loose phrase. What middle class means in one conversation is different to another person, very different to one person to another person. But a hollowing out the middle class, more top jobs, more bottom jobs, put it very crudely, but the stuff in the middle is good. And as a result of that, whether you're talking about a diverse population or a narrow population, what's interesting about your observation is look at the voting patterns in Brexit and Trump in terms of immigrants. Look, one of the things that amazes me, I mean, given some of the misogynism around Trump, women still voted for him. Now, that might have been something to do with the weaknesses of the Hillary Clinton candidacy, but the fact is you get some very hardened attitudes even from maybe not maybe even first-generation immigrants. And so I'm not sure that I agree. So, but the technology thing is even worse, because we have not been able to explain to a Detroit car worker the benefits of globalization. All he or she sees is the job gone, the Rust Belt. Yeah. You know, we don't get out of the London bubble. We all talk to ourselves. Go a few miles north, or east, or west, or south from London, and it's a very different picture.
But you and I know, whilst that is the sort of roar of Brexit or the roar of Trump, the solutions 2 or 3, 4, 5 years down from now are not necessarily going to be a magic wand of, you know, jobs back in Detroit and jobs...
Well, let's talk about jobs in advertising. I mean, tempting though it is just to talk about the future of the world, we're supposed to be talking about the future of advertising. And
they are inextricably interlinked.
They're very connected.
I thought advertising was the world.
But let me make a point.
Let's talk about the impact of technology.
Make a point. Come on.
Let me make a point. I'll talk about jobs and advertising and the creative industries in general, right? So the three of us are in well-established, long-established companies with lots of resource. If you actually look at some of the underlying trends behind some of the populist voting we saw is fear for the future, fear for jobs was the narrative. If you look at where jobs are actually created over the last decade, the net new jobs were largely created by companies who were 5 years old or less, right? So small, new, early-stage startup companies. Not by companies like ours, by and large. And I worry a lot about the free flow of talent or obstacles being put in the way of free flow of talent. Because if you're building a company and all of a sudden you have to make a choice about either the location of your company or whether or not you hire talent in the UK or in Amsterdam, and maybe the difference in that decision is a couple of £1,000 in visa fees or lawyers' fees, you're going to... Cash is king when you're trying to start up your business, when you're just a couple of people. So I think it's a really big issue. We don't know what way it's going to be solved, but it's a massive issue for Britain and job creation.
But just to that point, so there was an article in The Economist a few days ago which compared the big cap companies 20, 30, 40 years ago, mainly auto companies, their market cap size, and compared it to Google and Facebook, etc., and Apple today. Same market caps in total, and then compare the number of employees. And that's the giveaway. Massive employment around the auto companies. Much less employment. You employ 72,000.
Globally, we're over 70,000.
Yeah, 70,000. So we employ 200,000, right? But let's take out the associates. 130,000, 135,000. Your revenues, 90 billion. Mm-hmm. Our billings, if I take that as the comparison, because that's a bigger figure, so I like to quote it is 75 billion. But just look at that for a minute. So 75 billion of billings with 135,000 people. You're doing 90, and you get 72. That gives you the drift of what's happening. And and coming back to what we're talking about, the populist factions are going to get sustenance from that. Yeah. They're not going to get diminished.
But what do you think the impact is, Sir Martin, of technology and automation and robots on advertising? I mean, can't they now do a lot of the work of the agencies, the media agencies and the creatives to some extent?
You can look at the glass half full or glass half empty. I have to look at it being half full. And
but you've just been looking at it half empty for everyone else.
No, but that's politically. I'm just saying what the political waves that we're going to get. If I look at it at a micro level from a WPP point of view, what it means is that this definition of creative that we touched on again in the room, one of the, all these questions are prepared, by the way. And one of the prepared questions...
Actually, all these questions have gone out the window. We haven't talked about any of it. But
one of these questions was about, are we a media company, a data company, a digital company, or are we a creative company? And the word creative is used in the context of Mad Men and Don Draper, right? But the world has changed. There are creative people in data, believe it or not, in media, in digital, even in finance. There are very creative finance people. Sometimes they are too creative. So the definition of the word creativity, to your point, if we have AR, AI, VR, robots, whatever, the definition of creativity becomes... So I still think we're a creative business. That's where we win or we lose. But the definition has shifted massively. And to your point, it's going to shift even more massively. It's very difficult for us to compete for engineers, software engineers, against a Google or a Facebook. But increasingly, we're having to do that. And the pools of people that we go after, because we're shifting our business more to data and digital and AI and everything else, means that we're going to increasingly...
So are there going to be fewer jobs in the future?
My view is yes.
Because a lot of it's going to be done by computers?
Yes. I mean, you see that with the rise of programmatic. I was here with the head of our M platforms and Group M. Just a few minutes ago, we were talking about Xaxis. And I mean, if I look at the composition of our business today, and one of your questions is going to be, what do we see the biggest single impact in the next 10 years? I would have said, I wouldn't say it's necessarily the biggest, but it's certainly one of the most powerful that we're going to see, is the rise of control of the data. Control of the data. I have here sitting next to me a walled garden. Doesn't look like much like a walled garden, but he is. Now, Google's walled garden is lower. There's some other walled gardens that are even higher. The Amazon walled garden is 2 or 3 times the size and is just starting. So, and my view is, somewhat, let me say this, Amazon is going to give Google a run for its money on search. That's coming. Just like Snap might give Facebook a run for its money on social. We'll see. So I think there's some shifts taking place which are very fundamental.
I mean, you saw the power of data in television advertising very early on. Are we seeing a shift away? Is power moving away from the advertising industry to the clients and to the broadcasters because they've got the data?
Look, all we did is we said broadcasting long-term needs to have a direct path back to its individual consumers, and we built a platform that now does that, and 15 million people have registered with us, and half the young people in the UK are now interacting directly with Channel 4 in a way that they couldn't, or it wasn't possible 5 years ago. Now, that does have many business advantages, and it's helped us to, in a sense, avoid a disintermediation layer being inserted between us and our viewers, which has been very important to us and has now been widely followed in, or is being followed in the industry. But I sort of step back from that. I think I don't see this as an either-or. I think that what our jobs is in our different ways is to understand the relationship between technology and culture, really. And culture, whilst I accept Sir Martin's view that creativity seeps through all aspects of what we do, I think in a slightly more, I suppose, conventional way, writers, performers, musicians operate in a sphere of our public life which remains hugely important, and if curated well in these new environments, can reach out to audiences in all sorts of new ways. And so what makes, I think, all of our jobs really interesting is what is the best way of managing all this technological capability and this data capability in the context of very high quality, brilliant art and culture and performance. And in the case of Channel 4, what's extraordinary about what we do is whether it's journalism, whether it's comedy, whether it's drama, whether it's amazing documentaries, all of these arts are on offer, but they can't reach audiences unless we are equally creative in the means by which we reach our audiences. So,
but who is the biggest commissioner of content effectively in the world today?
Well, interestingly, Netflix has gone on a tear, and they're definitely doing
behind
very,
them?
very interesting. Well, let's see whether Apple
Who won Oscars?
3 of them.
Amazon Prime?
But interestingly, Amazon didn't actually... It's an interesting story, that, because they didn't actually develop those movies. They went to the Sundance Film Festival and bought finished films. What Film 4 does is it spends 2 or 3 years developing movie scripts.
So that's the beginning, isn't it, David?
Well, yes, but it's a value chain where someone needs to incept ideas.
They're coming for us.
I don't think anybody can control or get a monopoly on creativity.
No, I agree. The ocean is really, really big.
But you're going to be producing content, aren't you?
Well, we've got a platform that enables everybody to produce content.
Yeah, but you'll be producing content.
I don't know. I mean, we'll never say never, but it's not... We're focused on making sure that people like Hamza, who was on stage earlier on, can start out with an idea and a message and work and build an audience and then end up talking to people like Channel 4 and the BBC to get commissioned for...
But if Steve Mnuchin says the tax bill is going to be in place by August, and if as a part of that, many people think that's impossible, but let's see whether it happens or not. If part of that is repatriation of profits from abroad, Apple, you are going to have massive amounts of cash. You can do it on buybacks, you can do it in dividends, but you can also invest. My guess is we're going to see, if that happens, we're going to see a very significant investment in content.
You know, I think that the title of the last session was The Future of Storytelling in a Diverse Industry. You know, and when I see a title like that, I think sometimes it calls into question maybe storytelling is somehow potentially under threat in some way. When I look at our world, you know, the digital world or the world of the internet, the future of it is storytelling. It is professional content. It is creative content. I think what's happened over the last decade is that the concept of what professional or high-quality content is has been democratized to some extent, you know, which is enabling the kind of the YouTube generation to create and to build audience and to be getting to a point where they become important in terms of their cultural influence, but also in terms of having conversations with you guys and with big brands. So I think it's about, you know, we've got to find ways to fuel the creative talent that exists everywhere, not just in the remit of large companies. So I don't know what happens next. In the same way, I don't know what the kind of the immigration laws in the UK will be or the outcome of Brexit. But I think it's about having the principles of what we think will make a great ecosystem. And it's going to be great content that's tailored for very diverse audiences and that enables the producers of that content to make a strong living out of it.
Coming back to sort of a shorter-term problem that you've got to get over, surely, how are you going to win back trust in digital advertising, given there is a breakdown of trust with clients in terms of what they're buying, where the money goes, how much of it is really watched? How are you going to rebuild that connection with the people who are spending the money?
So I've had a lot of conversations with brand owners on the back of some of the articles that appeared recently. And you know, the articles raised questions for them. They called us and said, well, what's going on? Is there a problem? How big is the problem? Is there something new going on that I'm not aware of? And we were able to allay their concerns by and large and explain to them all of the great stuff we do. You haven't allayed their concerns? Not all of them. No, I don't think so. But I don't think the industry has allayed all concerns that exist from advertisers. And we saw the discussion that came from Pritchard.
We can spin this, Ronan, or we can.
No, we need to
speak the truth.
Tell the truth, Martin.
I'm quite happy to speak to the truth.
But I have 3 major clients here in the UK.
Yeah.
who have contacted me recently, personally, and said brand safety is a massive issue. And they don't agree. They wouldn't agree with what you just said. You know, Mark Pritchard made his second speech where he said that what had been proposed more by Facebook, to be fair, than Google, but Facebook and Google, was insufficient. So in the brand safety, and you know, with Snapchat, Snap, which was launched just a few days ago, there are some brand safety issues within 72 hours of being floated, which are being raised in terms of inappropriate placing of content. And we acknowledge the difficulty that user-generated content is very difficult to control. I mean, you don't know what, by definition, what's going to come out.
That's right.
The fundamental issue, in my view, and in Group M's view, and indeed our competitors' views, direct competitors' views, the fundamental issue is you have to take responsibility for this as a media company. You are not a passive, sitting there, a digital engineer, tightening the digital pipes with your digital spanner and not responsible for the flow-through of content in those pipes. You are responsible for it. Just like David's responsible for Channel 4, just like Rupert Murdoch is responsible for what goes through News Corp and Fox and James and Lachlan, just like Bob Iger is responsible at Disney. You are responsible, and you have to step up and take responsibility. You have the resources. Your margins are enormous. You have control of the algorithms. You don't explain to people how those algorithms work. You change them, and not you and Facebook. You have to change. My view, if I sound somewhat...
David? I understand. Can I respond? Because I think we're very focused on making sure that we build an ecosystem that works for everybody, right? That works for the users, the publishers, and the advertisers. And if we somehow lower a threshold or lower the threshold of quality or what we think is good for that ecosystem, it falls apart. We all lose trust in it. What we take very seriously is what we can do in terms of our engineering in the first instance. So, we do take out our digital spanners, and we do work very hard to make sure that we put the algorithms in place to root out anything that is offensive or malicious or harming the ecosystem. But we also throw a lot of people at it then as well. We also do the human reviews of any of the content which is borderline or which is questionable. And we also rely on our community to flag to us, and whether that's the advertising, publishing, or viewing community to flag to us anything that they see that is questionable. And immediately we have, we've got very strong systems in place to be able to take that down. Do we get it right in every instance? No, we don't. And we're the first people to hold up our hands and say that if we get it wrong, when we get it wrong, and how we're going to correct it.
Look. So the CMOs of our second and third largest clients, so Keith Weed at Unilever has been banging on about this, his 3 Vs, value, validation, viewability. Yep. We've been heavily supportive, Group M, WPP have been heavily supportive of this. In my view, not supportive enough because we haven't been effective. Our third largest client is Procter & Gamble, and Mark Pritchard is now also the chairman of the ANA, who conducted these inquiries into all sorts of things in America. So the fact is that whether you say you're doing it or not, you're clearly not doing enough.
Yeah, I think David, it's what's interesting. I think with this issue and the Facebook issue on fake news is it's always we're working on it defence. And the reality is that, just as Sir Martin just said, and this is a really important point, I have a legal position as editor-in-chief of Channel 4 News. If Krishnan goes on to Channel 4 News and broadcasts something that is unvalidatable as a story, basically, in a mild case, we are going to get a kind of Ofcom down on us. Potentially, we will get a fine. In a worst-case scenario, and in 1 or 2 occasions in the history of Channel 4, we've got close to this, we could have a licence removed as a public service broadcaster. So we operate in a world of high levels of accountability, not just in journalism, but in terms of the legality and the responsibility of the codes that we're adhering to. And so I think this is such a fundamental issue because
but
the defence...
but you're creating and commissioning and publishing that content.
Yes, I know, but the algorithmic defence is now no longer valid because what we've seen is politics and culture are being so heavily influenced by the power of your platforms, and also the economics of content creation are being so fundamentally affected.
Jobs are being destroyed.
Yeah, I mean, the newspaper. If we had a newspaper panel here today, and we were on a session last week at Enders talking about the newspaper industry, I mean, they are on their knees. Print journalism is on its knees.
They're on their knees to such an extent that they're considering setting up national sales organisations. This would be like the 6 advertising agency groups who never get together on anything getting together. So the threat is so great.
But what is the advertising industry's responsibility in this, David? David, what would
the
you say,
agency or the owners?
Well, look, I think with advertisers and with agencies, we need to work together to have really high-profile discussions, just like we're having today. And I do agree, whether it's through legislation or whether it's through public pressure, that Google and Facebook are intelligent organisations that will evolve and will respond. But the whole history of the internet is kind of, act first and sort of seek forgiveness second. And we've seen that's how the products have evolved over now decades. But the cultural, political and economic impact of what is going on has got so profound that it is clearly, altering political structures. And we can't just pretend politely that it's business as usual, because it just isn't business as usual.
I mean, we're on the subject of fake news, but I think, what constitutes fake news? We had a conversation in here the other night around this big red bus that seems to have caused such a furore around the messaging that was on the side of that at the time of the referendum, and an inability of anybody to go out and challenge that or to push back on it. And I think it's very important that we get a balance right where people are allowed to go out and create content and have a voice and get their message out there. But look, just let me finish. I think it's also really important that we enable people to understand how to verify and understand where that opinion comes from. What we can't do is restrict people into their echo chambers, into a set of views and consumption of content that a very small minority control.
You could stop putting advertising against it, though, couldn't you? You could stop everyone making money out of this whole area of content.
Let's make it very simple, right? You, and I'm just trying to help you out. You are better to deal with than Facebook. Let me put it very simply.
Thank you.
Okay? But you and Facebook control 75% of digital advertising, which in and of itself is about 30% of the world market.
Apparently not for long if the other guys are coming.
No, but there'll be competition, hopefully. It's in the future, not currently or in the past. And digital is going to be at least 40%. I think Group M is forecasting 40% by 2020. You have 75%. Some people say that last year, you and Facebook had 103%, to which I look somewhat quizzically, and that's because some have gone out of business, or they've actually gone backwards. So if 103% of let's say 100% of the marginal, that imposes a responsibility on you. And it's not, when I was looking at your P&L coming here, as I recall it, you're not exactly suffering on the margin point of view. So I think what's starting to happen, and we've not seen a tailing off of spending on Google or Facebook. We were talking about that before we came on stage. And it's despite measurement issues, viewability issues, fake news issues, fraud issues, digital still grows, whilst the newspapers, particularly in their archaic form, felling trees and distributing newsprint, is under tremendous pressure. Revenue's down 15, 20, 25% last year. It's a disaster. So what I'm saying to you is, I think David's saying to you, is, and it's unfair because we should have other people who are responsible for the worldwide operations of Google rather than just the UK. But what we're saying is it imposes a responsibility to change. And the data thing, finally. Privacy is used as a fig leaf, not to do things. That doesn't mean that we're saying as an agency, or a group of agencies, that privacy is not important. We want to protect consumers against breach of privacy. But we want access to the data to enable us to do things in a more targeted, more refined, more acceptable way. And if the walled gardens are not prepared to share that data, it's going to get increasingly difficult, in my view.
So I think the responsibility piece is very important. I mean, I talked earlier on about how, if we don't maintain high standards, if we don't have a great ecosystem for all of the players to exist in across, publishers and users and platforms like ourselves, the thing falls apart. So what does that mean? Are we doing enough? Is the fight over? Is everything perfect? No, clearly not, because it's evolving at such a rapid rate, both in terms of the type of content that are being published, the way in which each of us uses technology evolves kind of day to day and week to week. But we do take it very seriously. We work with a lot of external organisations to make sure that we set those standards and that they can mark all of our homework. So we're actively working with people like Comscore and Nielsen, with TAG, more locally with people like JICWebs and DTSG, to make sure that we're participating and holding ourselves up as being responsible participants in the ecosystem. And we've got to work together because it's moving at such a fast pace. Things like better ads. There's a lot of bad ads that happen. There's a lot of bad quality, bad user experiences. But even what works for a user has been shifting from one year to the next. So we're making changes in the types of formats that we're allowing on platforms like YouTube because, again, users are not engaging with things that used to work.
And it's unfair because we should have somebody from Facebook on here as well. But we've had I think I'm right in saying 3 incidents on Facebook statistics in the last 6 months. The first one was a failure to include in the data up to 3-second views. Now, Facebook didn't get dinged from an advertising point of view because they didn't use that metric apparently for selling advertising. But if you did this, if the same thing, or if in our audience measurement business, if we came up with 3 mistakes of that magnitude within 6 months, we'd be out of business.
The really good news for TV, at least in the UK, and this is a really stunning statistic, is that the proportion of total ad sales in the UK that went to TV 20 years ago was around 27%, and the proportion of the total pie that goes to TV today is around 27%. So what it shows is that the UK has a very particular structure in the TV market, partly driven by the fact that a lot of viewing goes to the BBC, and therefore the quality of the airtime that the remaining viewing goes to is proportionately more valuable and impactful in the marketplace. And that's what's led to strong support for television in the UK. And I would like to think the combination of the fact we're still delivering a fantastic quality of product with the fact we have evolved in our data proposition, because for us, the beautiful combination is the breadth of the medium that we're really good at, combined with the targetability of the online viewing. And in the case of whether it's ITV ourselves or Channel 5, we have a lot of viewing online now in the main screen in the living room, which is really combining the force of the two media together.
Can I get you to do a bit more sort of future gazing? I mean, to that, how long do you think, Sir Martin, the television environment of advertising will last? If we're looking ahead into decades.
Well, so
given the unreliability that you described in digital advertising,
let's just sort of try and broaden that just for a second. So, if you said to us, what do we see going on currently, and in our projections of the future, what are the things, the big media shifts? Well, the first is we touched on. Traditional newspapers and magazines are probably over-indexed, although I have to say the average reader of the Times newspaper here in the UK spends 43 minutes on
and culturally and politically
very important.
Still very, very central.
And from a democracy point of view.
So the numbers don't belie the kind of significance in the national conversation.
Basically, probably over-indexed. Not in the digital form, but in the traditional form. The second big thing is mobile. That it's under-indexed. I think time spent in the US, and the latest statistics for mobile is about 25%, and the industry is investing, not WPP, the industry, about 12%. So under-indexing mobile, and we haven't been smart enough or clever enough with creative and the technology, the bandwidth and the size of the screens, and the definition is not good enough yet, but we'll get there. And the third thing, coming to heart of your point, which is something that David, I know is focused on, if you start to look at linear TV, that's not OTT or internet-delivered TV, which is in the internet and mobile box. But you look at linear TV, there is some evidence that there is pressure on that relationship. In other words, it's over-indexed, that the industry is investing a little bit too much, not massive amounts, too much in comparison to what audiences. You know, look at the Nielsen...
I obviously don't agree with that.
No, but it's a very important, because measurement is critical. And I was going to say, there's one other thing...
But ROI is the other factor.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
But there's another thing that came up just over my, not my desk, but on my network last night. A really interesting example of how measurement is being... So Nielsen does retail audit data in America. And in the last 2 months, the packaged goods companies have been particularly alarmed by what they saw, a lack of momentum, a lack of sales. Why? Not because there's a lack of sales, but because the Nielsen measurement of retail audit does not include, basically, e-commerce. It looks at traditional fixed retailing. It doesn't look at click retailing or electronic retailing. It is exactly a mirror image of what we see on television. Right?
Although the biggest segment of advertisers to television in the last decade has become digital players, and I see this again and again and again. Digital players to build their brands. Ironically, paradoxically, whole sectors have been created by using TV to build rapid awareness. So the ROI, I mean, television in the UK is still phenomenally inexpensive by comparison to most other countries in the world.
Look, the audience measurement statistics understate the value of Channel 4 because we receive...
Tweet that immediately.
He didn't realise suddenly the light went off. So it's the same thing on this. It's fascinating that the same thing is happening on retail audit. And it's because the channels are shifting, the channels of distribution are shifting. Why does Unilever buy...
Look, additionally, the really critical thing here is the quality of the context of the environment, because we all know this. If you are watching compelling content, you are going to, and with good quality creative advertising, you are the recall and the engagement is sky high. And what we know is the secret in all of this digital revolution is that the level of engagement, the level of distraction, the level of clutter that exists in this other world is exponentially increasing. So, therefore, proportionately, the value of quality goes up.
Well, can we talk a little bit about quality
and also, the value of hits goes up as well. AKA...
Because we're here in the context of the future of advertising. Well, hang on, no, I want to move this on, because we can go round and round in circles.
It's a trend altogether.
We'll come back. But look, we've been talking, for the last couple of days about the great advertising campaigns of the past. And you're talking about quality advertising in the future. And I want to know whether you really think there is a future for high-quality content in advertising, or is it going to be all this rubbish that treats me like a bloody idiot every time I go online and tries to sell me something I bought last week?
I mean, look, I am a complete... I'm a self-confessed romantic when it comes to creativity and advertising, and I don't want to dance on pinheads of the word creativity, but I think, look, I'm terrifically proud of the fact that the Superhumans campaign is regarded as, by the industry, as one of the best ad campaigns of the last 100 years, and the fact that Channel 4 is here, working with the industry to push the creative boundaries of what's possible. I really believe in that. I think some of the things that I grew up with, and I was here the other night talking about the fact the first brand I ever worked on was Shake and Vac. For those, the audience is far too young to remember the jingle, but, television still has an amazing power to create brand culture and to create memorability. And I think we mustn't give up on that. And I think part of this whole event and part of the exhibition is to, not to say that it's an either-or, but to say that as long as we can create amazing brand impact through amazing creativity and all the other things that go with it, the industry has a fantastic future.
I've had the Shake and Vac jingle going through my head since you mentioned it the other night, so it's clearly
this
powerful.
This is also romantic.
It is romantic,
it's really romantic.
But I don't think it's wrong. I really don't think it's wrong, because we've still got great movies, we've still got great theatre, we've still got great hit TV shows, and they're still moving the dial. It's just the world's got more complicated.
You will still have them, David, but we have to face the fact that they might be done by different people. So I was just going to say, why does Unilever buy Dollar Shave Club? Is it because it wants to compete with Gillette? No. It's because it needs a channel of engagement and a channel of distribution. And it pays $1 billion or whatever it is for 3.5 million names. It's 30% of which, by the way, are women. 70% are men. So there are massive changes taking place. And I applaud everything you say. And the importance of the creative services. One of the things post-Brexit, why has the UK economy been so relatively strong to what people thought, including myself, would happen after June the 23rd? The contribution made by the creative services. Right? It's been colossal, film industry, etc. But it's going to change. And the players are going to be very different. And when I talk about Amazon, I mean, my favorite question to anybody, to clients, people in the startup is, what worries you? What keeps you awake at night? In my case, it's not a 3-month or 4-month-old daughter. It's the thing I hear most is Amazon. It's extraordinary. It used to be Google and Facebook.
I think that...
Now it's Amazon. So what I'm just saying is this. It's shifting, and it's shifting quite violently and changing quite violently. And, just take Snapchat as an example. That may be a counterbalancing force to Facebook. We, as agencies working on behalf of our clients, want to see more balance in the marketplace. 75% of digital going to Google and Facebook, or 100% of the marginal amount, is not, in our view, healthy in terms of maintaining a competitive marketplace. So if AOL gets together with Yahoo in April, which I'm told will happen, that's another potential third force or fourth force. Even our own Xaxis without Nexus is, in theory, another force. We have to have more balance in the marketplace. Otherwise, we get into the distortions that we touched on, which was, on measurability, we don't get enough data. Viewability, we're not getting enough purchase. I mean, all these things, fake news, and all these things to be coming big. And unless we change those dynamics, it's going to change. So all I'm saying is, I applaud everything you say. I worked at Saatchi's for 9 years, been at this at WPP for 32 years. So it's 40 years of the 100. I've seen the industry. And it is a wonderful industry, highly creative. It's great content. It's great opportunities for young people, more so now today than it was 10 or 15 years.
I suppose what I see is, when looking at it from the other side, from the content creation side, I still see, creators having huge global impact. And, on one level, as long as one is still creating high-quality original content, the pipes sort of, sort themselves out. I mean, I think it's very interesting you say this, Sir Martin, because in a way, your whole business model has also been about scale. And, it's also been about consolidation.
I wish we had 75%.
Yeah, I know. But, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it seems that is a business model that kind of inexorably just continues.
Well, there are other forces at work. And there was an opportunity earlier on when we were talking about, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I think it is happening, that the vibrancy of our business, for example, here in the UK, amongst the small, let's call it the small and medium-sized sector, as opposed to, let's say, the 6 agency groups, the vibrancy is not as great, in my view, as it was when I was at Saatchi's in the 80s. Why is that? Well, part of it, frankly, and this gets into very tender territory, but I'll say it, is clients are saying to us they want us to become a bank. They want us to give them 90-day payment terms, 120-day payment terms, 180. And in fact, when one of Aegis's clients went down in Spain about 2 years ago into bankruptcy, it was discovered that Aegis had given them 2 years credit. Another little thing is intellectual property protection. We are being asked by procurement departments to give unlimited indirect coverage for IP breaches, which means if we're working on a project with somebody else and they screw up, we are liable unlimited. In theory, we could go down. Probability of it happening is small, but I'm not prepared to do that.
So why does it make you less violent?
How
does it make you more cautious?
How can a small company survive in those sort of conditions? How can a medium-sized country be an insurance company or a bank? It can't do it. So some of the things that are happening are the pressures from procurement And it's a complicated story. Low growth, low inflation, no pricing power, focus on cost.
It hasn't stopped you growing like Billy-O for the
No,
10
because
years.
but the pressures, David, are colossal.
No, the pressures are, but the solution would appear from your side in terms of your business model to keep growing globally in order to deal with those headwinds.
Well, the UK is 12% of our business.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about the pressures and what those pressures do. You know, if this is where the social thing becomes even more important. If small and medium-sized companies are the biggest generators of employment, and as we touched on before, that, you know, why do we have these populist movements? Lack of economic growth, lack of job opportunities. If small and medium-sized companies are being squeezed, the generation of jobs is being squeezed. Quite apart from all these issues about do robots mean less jobs, right? The pressure is too great in the system, in my view, and it has to change. And I think you probably will see governments doing. I mean, ironically, what Philip Hammond did in relation to Nick and IC probably goes against that in terms of the self-employed or the small companies. But that's going to have to change, in my view. And the pressures are just too great. And we see, we haven't even touched on AT&T and Time Warner. You've got the telcos now are going to come into the creative side of the business and do we think that's going to be the last of the consolidations? No.
We've got a few minutes just to throw it open, if you dare. Who would like to ask a question? Yes, down here. Can we get a microphone over here, quick?
Hi there. My name is Devarshi, and I'm from Sky Media Multicultural. One of the questions, in fact, some stats, 28% of the 16 to 34-year-olds in the UK come from an ethnic background, and 25% of the 16 to 24-year-olds, again, come from an ethnic background, and half of the white British population is under 40 years, whilst half of the ethnic population is under 12 years, as we speak. My question is, if you're talking about the future and diversity and all those kind of stats, why is it that in this particular country we don't celebrate any multicultural campaigns, as a result of which agencies are reluctant to spend money on that, which again has a chain effect in terms of getting more and more talent into the industry? And I find it rather surprising. The US has that. I know Tom Knox, if he's in the house.
We get the idea. Sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but we've got limited time. Do you want to deal with that briefly?
Well, you said the US hasn't. I mean, more than 50% of babies being born in the US are from multicultural backgrounds. And what we see, for example, the allocation of Hispanic budgets or Asian American budgets or Afro-American budgets is still underweighted. So I would say the issue, and I would say the reason, it's a bit like why didn't digital catch on faster. It takes time, particularly amongst major companies, both on the client side, agency side, and media, for this to change. But it will change very quickly because the statistics you quoted will ensure that it does. So as that next generation comes through, I mean, just think for a minute that the generation graduating from American universities now is probably the first or one of the first generations that has lived with the internet since the day they popped their head out of the womb. Right? So the moment they get into positions of influence, authority, which they will probably do very quickly given some of the things that are going on in their 20s and 30s and 40s, it will change violently. But it's a social change. In America, it's exactly the same issue.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Yeah.
Hi, my name is William. I just wanted to ask you, why are you so convinced that the stopping of movement of people in Europe is going to happen? Like, Brexit's not complete yet. Like, it's still early days. And even if that was the case, shouldn't we be focusing on the diversity inwards? Like here, I still kind of feel that we are more diverse, but I still feel there's still a lot of cultural issues that stop us being more diverse in the advertising industry.
I hope you're right. I mean, I still as an unreconstructed Remainer, hope that there will be a Brexit check. But every day that goes by, I think the probability, I mean, they're fighting about it in the House of Lords at the moment, that there'll be a vote at the end of the day. Whenever we know what the deal is, they'll come back and say, have another referendum or have another vote in the House. I don't think it's like that. I mean, the probability is very low. I mean, it would take an economic, if not catastrophe, it would take very, very bad economic conditions and a blow up in the negotiation with the EU, I think, over the next 2 years for that to happen.
Yeah. Look, I think the reality is that Britain is already more diverse than probably the Brexiteers wish it to be, but it is irreversible as we stand today. So can Britain reflect itself back to itself through the medium of advertising and other media better? I believe that it can, and I think this is a whole series of very sort of detailed actions that we have to go through. I was just in the green room. We had a great conversation about the guys who were on the previous panel. They created their base on YouTube, and now they're moving on to the BBC. And I think commissioning decisions, how they get made, how people's careers get supported. For us, I mean, the most inspiring example for me in the last 7 years was Steve McQueen. He was an award-winning artist who'd never made a movie. He got the chance to make a movie with Film 4 called Hunger. Then he made his second film with us, Shame, and then in the end he made 12 Years a Slave. So in 3 movies he became the first black man to win an Oscar. And I think this is about long-term support of the talent in the country. We have exceptional talent here. We've got to give it more opportunity. We've got to get it out there onto the biggest platforms. And then we will reflect back to ourselves the society that we see when we walk out on the streets, not just in London, but in Bradford and in Manchester and in Glasgow. We know we are living in a more diverse world than we see on our screens currently, and I think we're all part of making that change.
And just to the point, if we become a Singapore, effectively, which is, I think, what may happen in one way or another, look what's happened at Singapore. I mean, it prospered. When they detached from Malaysia, when Lee Kuan Yew took them away from Malaysia, everybody said it was going to be a complete disaster. They prospered. But interestingly, problems started to happen in the Singaporean elections, which are heavily influenced elections in a sense, when the proportion of the population moved over 50% in terms of non-Singaporeans. So, even in a country like that, which depends on growth from externally, these sort of issues that we're talking about erupt. Pressure on housing, pressure on schools, pressure on job opportunities. It's the foreigners coming in and taking it. But I take your point, and we're going to work more with today or yesterday was it the Commonwealth ministers are all here. See Liam Fox to talk about greater multilateral trade opportunities. So if EU is squeezed and off the agenda, we're going to go for Brazil and Russia and China, maybe not Russia, but China and India and developing multilaterals.
Just in the last couple of minutes, I mean, it comes as nicely back to the question of talent and the future of advertising over the next 100 years, because the glass half empty conclusion of this conversation might be there are going to be fewer jobs, it's going to be done by robots, Google and Facebook are going to have all the power. Why would any young person want to come and work in advertising? You might think, shouldn't they all just go off and work for tech?
It's a much better opportunity than it was 10 or 15 years ago. It's much more enticing and interesting, I think. If you said, for graduates for a minute, whether they come from wherever, that in the old days, investment banking and consulting were the dominant, they were, whether we like it or not, they were the dominant opportunities. Today, because we're working with you, you are our biggest media investment.
Thank you.
Hopefully after this conversation you will still be.
As long as we stay like that, you can say what you like.
No, but we work with David. We contribute singly about a third of your advertising revenues come from Group M in one way or another. And but it's really exciting. I mean, and we're getting closer to the technology. So I think kids coming out of, put it that way, young men and women coming out of art schools, design schools, seeing an industry which is more aligned to digital, more aligned to data, more aligned to media. It's not like it was when I was in Charlotte Street, making me sound really an old fart, with Saatchi's. The dominance of the traditional creative, the Don Drapers, is gone. Quite rightly. Because one of the fundamental problems, remember the Mad Men series? Remember what happened? The creative director's lounge was replaced by the IBM mainframe. The media director said, well, the media guy never got on the board, if you remember. He wasn't a director, he was a media manager. He complained to one of the partners that he wasn't on the board. And then he said, when they got taken over by McCann, he said, do you know that McCann's have got 4 data analysts, and we have none, or data analysts.
But you know that some people think we may have gone too far the other way. And I think, for me, it's best to try and aim for a balance between the art and the science of what we do. And I think we've got to probably do a better job of encouraging creative talent that perhaps isn't... you have an engineering background. You're an extremely highly educated person. A lot of creative people don't have as much formal education. What I loved about the ad industry I joined in the 80s, for all its good and its ill, and there was quite a lot of ill, was the fact that I felt it was more diverse in terms of social mobility. I think, you could get from the post room to the boardroom.
Well, I was just thinking, as you were saying, but I think that's...
And a lot of the people who are on the exhibition about the icons of the industry, they were just coming from lots of different places.
Isn't it great?
I think we have become more homogenous, and I think that there's something lost there, and we should do something about it.
But I think the question suggested that was either or, and I think it's both.
Yeah.
So if you want to be successful in a creative industry, or the advertising industry, you've got to have the science and the art in equal measure in order to be successful.
It's madmen and mathsmen.
Absolutely.
But where's the opportunity for, the kid from the tower block down from Brick Lane who has less formal education but is extremely talented and creative?
So we've got to make sure that they get that chance.
That's I think, the big issue for all of us, because... And I think the industry was... You know it, because you were there in Charlotte Street. There was just more social mobility in the industry than I think there is today.
I'm not sure.
We're getting very nostalgic.
You started in the...
Well, let's be nostalgic for the future, because if we don't have improved social mobility in media, we are really screwed.
Frank Lowe, I remember, started in the mailroom, but I can't remember what Frank Lowe's, where he went to school, where he was born and bred. I mean, I think that's romantic too. I think...
I'm proud to be romantic.
No, but listen, it's a mixture of the two. You're right. It is art and science, left brain, right brain, however you want to describe it. But it's a much more balanced. And I think for young people, it's a much more attractive industry. And I always remember there's a guy called William Eccleshare who went to McKinsey, left J. Walter Thompson, went to McKinsey, came back. And I said, William, why did you come back? He said, well, at McKinsey, they kept on saying it is a fact that, whereas at WPP or wherever, they say, I think that. And I think that sort of sums up the balance. I mean, you've got to have the judgment, but also the science. Some people in our industry say data, constricts us. It doesn't. More data gives us better understanding. Somebody complained about, who was it? You complained about the fact the targeting is not right. It's only a question of time.
Will anybody in the future make the kind of money that you've made out of advertising? or are you the last fat cat?
I haven't... Well, wait a minute. You can't get away with that. Because it isn't made. It isn't made. It's invested back in the company. If it is wrong to start a company from scratch with 2 people in a room to wherever we've got to now, with about probably 500,000 to 600,000 people dependent on their livelihoods, it's a burden and it's a responsibility. But mea culpa, if that's a mea culpa. But
do you think any of these could?
Yes.
Is it possible?
Absolutely. In fact, the opportunity... just look at Evan Spiegel, right? Which is the latest example. Look at Larry and Sergey.
Why is it always two people in a garage that make billions?
Well, you know, the average, interesting, I was looking at the average employee at Snapchat has $1.4 million in restricted stock units. The average employee at Snapchat has $1.5 million in RSUs on the flotation. So now, we'll see whether that turns into real money. It's just paper, which is your condemnation of me. I'm afraid it's all in paper.
I'm not condemning you at all. It's all imaginary. Congratulations. On that note, sadly, we must leave it there. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
To all my...
Very good.
Thanks a lot.